Hi everyone, I'm Max from AFM.aero. Welcome to the Pilot Training Connect podcast, where we interview individuals from the pilot training industry to learn more about the organizations and their views of the industry. Every week, we will invite an industry leader to sit down with us to share their knowledge and views. This week, I have the great pleasure to be joined by Captain Shahinsha SK, founder of Aviacons, a pilot training organization located in India, which is well known due to its partnership with Embry-Riddle Asia. Welcome to the Pilot Training Connect podcast, Captain Shahinsha.
Thank you very much, Max. Pleasure meeting you.
It is nice to see you again after Wings India. So I know we just met 2 weeks ago at the largest air show in India. I was quite surprised with how big the event was. It certainly exceeded my expectations. So if anyone is listening or if anyone is watching, I can highly recommend checking out Wings India, which is every year, if I'm not mistaken, Captain Shahinsha.
Every 2 years, basically every alternate year, even years, basically, I can tell you.
Okay, so every 2 years, it's located in Hyderabad in central India. It's at its own dedicated airport. This time there were Indian flight schools there. There were training aircraft there. Airbus had brought in Airbus A350. Ministers are there. So it is really a great place for anyone who's interested in the Indian pilot training industry or Indian aviation industry to kind of go and learn more about the great potential of the Asian tiger that is India, and connect and meet people who are there. So Captain Shahinsha, tell us more about your pilot training organization, Aviacons, and yourself.
Myself, as I've completed my education abroad, did my license graduation. After that, I worked for a couple of years there, then came back to India. Then I started my conversion process. So during the conversion process, I understood that there is a very high requirement for services, consultancy services, or support services for people who are coming back after completing their license from different countries back to India. There was even though there was flight school, but nobody was ready, or there was no such system that they can be guided through the entire conversion process. So once I completed the conversion process, I was thinking, why don't I help start doing such services? So back in 2007, it just started a very humble start as a single man run a consulting services for people who are coming back for conversion from my one-room apartment in Hyderabad. Then slowly it started expanding, and in 2008, I had my first office. And then gradually, side by side, started giving theoretical training for the pilots, primarily for people who are coming back for conversion. And then it started for the ab initio people also. 2010, we had a good association, a cross-border, I'll call it as a cross-border association, 2010, with the first flight school in Male, in the island of Male, which was established in the Gan Island. But somehow, due to various situations in Gan, it did not go well beyond 2 years. So in 2012, we were forced to wind up that association. And since then, it was always remained as a theoretical training organization. In 2018, we had a major revamp with the team as well as the strategy. And we had an association with Embry-Riddle Asia. Then we also associated with Mayflower College, UK for the aviation English language proficiency testing and training. We got approved in 2019 by the UKCA as a satellite center for the testing. Then in 2019 end, the DGC also approved us for the testing services. So today we serve 4 airlines. We almost do close to 500 to 600 tests every year, and a number of other non-scheduled operators, student community. And we are also in the process of starting our own flight school. We are almost halfway through that.
Oh, fantastic. That's really fantastic. So also for anyone who's listening or watching, India has this process where in order to do a license conversion, so for any Indian cadet pilot who goes abroad and does their pilot training abroad, PPL, CPL, commercial pilot training, and then comes back to India, they have to do a certain process to convert their license, which includes actual flight training. Is it 12 hours, if I'm not mistaken? 12 hours of actual flying to convert the license to Indian DGCA?
Yeah, roughly we can call it as 10 to 12 hours, provided his recurrency training is all valid. So there is something called the recurrency, where preceding 6 months from the date of application, the trainee pilot should satisfy some of the requirements, like he should have completed 10 takeoff and landing by night, some 5 hours of IR, and some of the solo requirement like PIC, 15 hours of PIC should be there. So if he or she satisfies these recurrency requirements, then it is close to around 10 hours of total flying, which is required to convert his license.
Fantastic. So you've been around. Aviacons has been around for pretty much more than a decade now. You've continuously grown. So starting off from assisting consultancy services, assisting cadet pilots or commercial pilot license holders with their conversion process, to then offering ground school, to then offering ELP, to offering aviation English. And now I know when we met 2 weeks ago, you're now also expanding into the flight training space. I know when we met, there was a lot of excitement around expanding into the flight training space, because there's a clear demand in the Indian aviation industry for more flight training to happen within India. There's clear government policies to support such initiatives. So I think it would be quite good, maybe if we can discuss the current size of the industry, the current potential. I think I will just lead off with some of the market research that we've done on AFM.aero's side, which is that currently all of the airlines in India have less than 800 aircraft. But a country like India with 1.3, 1.4 billion people, if one were to look at its close neighbor, China, which has the same population size, the airlines there combined have 6,800 aircraft combined. So there's that huge potential growth in terms of aircraft being added to the Indian domestic and international operators. But it would be great to hear from you in terms of what is the potential and the growth that you foresee in the Indian aviation industry?
Okay. Just like the aviation till 1991 or 1992, it was entirely controlled by the government entity, and only the government airlines could fly. Maybe some of the non-scheduled operators were there, but after the open sky policy, the more private airlines started in India, like Jet Airways and that time East, West, Maudi Luft, etc. They started. Along with that, private flight schools also started. Till that time, it was always government flying clubs. It was always called a flying clubs. Basically, these flying clubs used to be like any other club around the world. They can do a private pilot, and if the one is interested, then he can continue progressing towards working towards a professional pilot license. So in the mid 80s, if I'm not wrong, somewhere in the mid 80s is the first academy was established in India called the Indira Gandhi Rashtriya Udaan Academy. So everyone who completes a PPL will undergo some exams, and they used to, I think, enroll for the professional pilot license program. After 93, more and more private flight schools started coming in, and the airlines started coming in, and there was a consistent growth in the airline, but on a very small scale, as I understand. And the training industry was also growing. Say from maybe 10 or 15 government flying clubs, it has gone to around maybe 20 or 25 flight schools, also called as flying clubs, because the terminology prevailed and continued. So 10 years back in 2010-12 time, there was total of 42 approved flight schools were in India, close to 42. Today, we are down by 32 or 33. That means 9 down. Most of the schools have closed down either by a mismanagement or due to the after effect of a recession, and they were not able to come up after that. But now in the recent past, in the last 2 years, the government of India is really pushing. The policies are being made pro industry, making pro industry. And I think in the next 2 years, you'll be able to see another 8 to 10 flight schools opening up.
Yeah.
But all these flight schools, including the current ones, apart from the government one, every flight school is a little graduated than a flying club, I would tell. It is not an integrated program as we see in the West or in other parts of the country or in Australia. So most of the flight schools are similar to a Part 61 flight school of US or Australia. It is a modular program, but combined. And it's so-called as the integrated one, but there is no real integrated flight school as such. So the requirement for an integrated flight school is there. That is what the airlines is looking at. And I think in the coming time, we'll have some integrated flight schools coming up. Number one.
Yeah, I think that's what amazes me the most, right? The Indian aviation market is absolutely booming. You've got an extremely large population. You've got a really fast growing middle class. But then when you look at the way the orders which the different airlines have, right? You've got airlines which have got more than 400 aircraft on order. So the airlines are all growing. But then at the same time, the flight training infrastructure, the pilot training infrastructure has not scaled at the same extent. What always surprises me is that how a country like India with 1.4 billion people currently only has 34 flight schools. And out of those 34 flight schools, half of them are state/government owned. And then another interesting statistic actually we found when we did our research was that more than a quarter of all training aircraft in India currently are also Cessna 152s, which have not been manufactured since the 70s. So I've always been really interested in the dynamics and in the size of the Indian pilot training industry specifically. But it's interesting that you say that 10 years ago, there were 9 or 10 more flight schools. So you've already kind of seen once that growth cycle, but it hasn't really taken off, but it has reduced again. What do you think were the main reasons for it? Because there seems to be clear demand for pilots, but as to my knowledge as well, most of the airline pilot training programs by Indian Airlines are currently partnerships with international pilot training groups. What do you think is the reason for the underperformance or the lack of growth in the Indian flight training infrastructure?
Yeah, the schools which has closed down in the last, say 9 to 10 schools closed down in 10 years. That means the average of a school is closing down every year. That is because a lack of professional approach, understanding of the industry. I would also tell maybe people who were steering these schools were not being given a full hand to go ahead and experiment few things so that they can sustain and continue the growth story. Number one. Number two, like also, if you look at the fleet size, the training fleet size, I can roughly tell you it is less than 200 aircraft, maybe precisely maybe around 160 or 165 aircraft. Out of that, almost 70% to 80% is Cessnas, and maybe around 20, 30 are other aircraft. So the next one in line is the Diamond aircraft. You have both the Lycoming one, which burns the avgas, and the diesel one, which burns the Jet A1 fuel. And after that, now the new entrant is also two-seater, very light category aircrafts are also coming in. But the majority of the aircrafts are Cessnas, and out of that, Cessna 152 are the favorite ones of the flight schools, which was last manufactured in 1985. So you will find all the Cessna 152s, which is manufactured almost 35 years plus. You know.
Mm.
So aging of the aircraft is an important factor, and the maintenance efficiency of the aircraft. That means you're maintaining an aircraft over and over again for 35 years, your efficiency goes down drastically after 20 years. You know, how much ever you're able to maintain. So it's a simple machine. That's why the people love it. There is nothing complicated. Everything is mechanical, nothing complicated. But it's time for us to look at new machines. It's time for us to look at new machines, not to stick on to one machine, but to look at various options so that you have availability in the market. You're not dependent on one manufacturer. So you let a lot of manufacturers to come in. So if you look at in the Europe or in other countries, they started putting two-seater aircraft, a very light category aircraft for the training purpose. And to support that, you have high complex simulators have been put to support that. Then you have an advanced training in a multi-engine. It can be a Diamond or a Piper as per the choice. So the requirement for new technology or new aircraft is very much important. And coming back to the size of the country, I think, yes, I think in the next 10 years, we are going to see the growth, maybe because of the regulations, which is not very friendly. Maybe the compounding of the growth is getting slowed. It's getting slowed down. But I think at least the current fleet size, if you say it's 800, I think at least it will get doubled maybe in the next 5 years' time. And maybe then again double of that in the next 5 years' time.
To come back to the size specifically of the flight training industry, right? So at the moment we've got 34 flight schools. I know that last year the Indian government or a subsidiary Airport Authority of India put out a tender where they were looking for 9 additional flight schools, all of which received bids, and you now have 9 additional flight school bases starting up this year. But of the initial 34 flight schools, you already mentioned it, right? These 34 flight schools have a total fleet of only 230 or so aircraft, which is really, really, relatively speaking, small. What would you say is the average number of aircraft that a flight school in India has, and what would you say is the average number of trainees that an Indian flight school does?
So it's basically like this. See, if we roughly take it as 200 aircrafts are available, trainer aircrafts are available, the average serviceability on a per day basis, you take it 80% basically. So any given point of time, you will see around 150 to 160 planes flying at the maximum, producing at the rate of, keep it around 6 to 8 hours per aircraft, per day. So if we take even 50, say, how much, 6 hours per day, and if you take around 150 aircraft flying, so close to around maybe 4 licenses, no, if I'm not wrong. So maybe around serviceability is around 70%. So the total output is close to around 400 licenses in a year, or 450 licenses in a year. That is close to around 90,000 hours, like 450, 90,000 hours in a year. So you roughly divide this 150 aircraft by 90,000. So you get somewhere around 600 hours per aircraft per annum, which is less than the global average. The global average is somewhere around close to 800 to 1,000 hours is the global average. So this is much less. So the difference of close to around 30%, 20 to 30% difference in the hours produced on a monthly basis or per hour aircraft basis is basically due to the maintenance related issues, maybe due to the airspace issues, and the aerodrome or the airstrip or the airport plays a very important role in the training. Say, if you have a self-sufficient, self-contained airport where all systems are available, then it is easy for the flight schools to fly continuously because they have got the ready manpower, they have got the fuel available, they have got the students. But when there are some closures, airspace restriction, weather issues, especially in the northern part of India during the winter times, it is very difficult to operate because of the visibility issues. And if you look at the southern part of India where the weather is better, say you will get an average of 300 flying days in a year, but the number of flight schools in the southern part is less. Where the
Yeah.
weather is better, you have a less flight schools. Say, for example, in all the 5 states put together, you have close to 6 or 7 flight schools.
Yeah.
So your remaining 27 or 26 flight schools are spread across in other areas where the weather is not that favorable.
Yeah.
So these things play an important part of. That is why if we increase, even if we increase the number of aircrafts, I think you'll be able to even scale up to a better number than producing 450, maybe around maybe 600, 700. You can start off with and coming closer to 1,000 pilots a year. And I think as per the data released by the government, it is closer to India needs somewhere around close to 1,000 pilots per year, 1,000 plus pilots every year for the next 10 years.
Yeah. So just so for everyone that is listening, when one looks at the order books, at the current order books of the Indian airlines, India needs approximately just above 2,000 new first officers every single year. The Indian government is putting a conservative number of between 1,000 and 2,000 pilots required every year for the next 10 years based on the order books and based on the demand, and looking also back at the history of India. And currently these 34 flight schools are producing 400 to 500 pilots every single year, which are kind of domestically trained. And then you've got another 300 to 400 Indian cadet pilots which train abroad and then come to India and do kind of their license conversion. I know the Indian DGCA just released the statistics for 2021, which was that there were 800 plus Indian CPL licenses being granted, but there was also the time delay with COVID where there was a buildup of license that had to be converted. But I think the key point, what I've realized during my visits and during studying the market, is that the Indian pilot training and specifically flight training infrastructure is severely underdeveloped. So there's a requirement for 1,000 to 2,000 pilots every year. The domestic schools are producing 400 to 500. So the government is trying to encourage the establishment of more flight schools. The Airport Authority of India has just released another tender where they're looking for an additional 15 flight schools this year. And they have a goal to have approximately 50 flight schools by 2023 or 2024 to be able to build the capacity of training more domestically. But it sounds to me a lot like not only does India need more flight schools, but it also requires more efficiency in terms of the operations of the flight schools in order to, utilize aircraft better than the flight hours that you've just mentioned. What would you recommend is a potential solution for increasing the efficiency in flight schools in India?
See, the primary one is the number of aircrafts. The trainer aircraft need to be increased. Now, see, the current entrepreneurs or the startup or somebody who want to start, there is no support from the government. There is no support from the banks. No proper system of leasing a trainer aircraft, or there is no support from the industry or from the airline for a startup flight school to come up. So if you don't increase your numbers, if you don't bring more airplanes into the flight training system, then how will you increase the efficiency of it? Number one. Number two, your manpower, the trained manpower available right now is more, but how many of them is worthy of employing in the flight training industry is yet to be seen. Now, merely getting a license, say a lot of people get a license, but how many of them are worthy of employing in the airlines or training industry is another factor. Now, because the primary goal is to safely to operate in a safe environment. So safety is a prime point. So you need to look at that. That means number one is to increase the number of trainer aircraft, for which government need to support the startups, government need to support the current entrepreneurs, and maybe through the financial institutions or through the banks. Then the availability of trained and professional manpower. So in India, there is a the way people think, okay, I'm not getting a job in the airline, so let me become an instructor, So nobody becomes an instructor by choice. Say, for example, if you look at in the US, the system, I would appreciate that it's good because you become a CPL holder, then you start working as a general aviation pilot or as a flight instructor, you earn it, you fly till around 1500 hours, then you undergo your airline exams. By the time you become 1500-hour old pilot, you are matured enough. You are no more 19, maybe you're 20 to 23. So age-wise, you are matured enough. You can understand what people are telling, and you are experienced to handle bigger machines. Here in India, like somebody who, for example, a person can get a CPL at the age of 18 to 19, and suddenly he becomes an instructor by undergoing a course. And suddenly, after the course, he undergoes an exam, then he gives the flight test and he becomes an instructor, and he straight away starts training a person, either an ab initio who is for a CPL course, and he starts flying with a 0-hour person, or he starts with a person who is aspiring for a CPL. On the other hand, if you look at in the Europe, I think the flight instructor, once he passes out, the first 50 hours is a controlled flights with his supervising person, and he is not able to, he can't give flight instruction for CPL, professional pilot candidates. That means the students who are, who have joined for a CPL program, but on the other hand, he is going to give the training for private pilot people. So there are these variations are there. So one is to increase the number of aircraft, to increase the trained manpower, and third, the important thing is the aerodromes. So Government of India has come out with a tender last year for the release of 5 aerodromes for accommodating 2 schools in each aerodrome. A total of 10 schools is what they have planned, I think, and the bid was successfully done, and 9 flight schools got selected. But out of the 9, almost 6 or 7, I think 6 flight schools are already existing, and the new ones are just 3 out of it. And the airfields which have been selected by the Airport Authority of India is not with respect to the training environment, in the sense they do not have a checklist to understand what are things required in an aerodrome to efficiently push the training. On the other hand, I think they have selected the aerodromes where their business is less. Say, for example, where the airlines are not operating, or there are no activities, and it is like a semi-abandoned, I will not call it as abandoned, maybe new aerodromes or old aerodromes where the business is less. So they must have thought, like, say, anyway, the business is less, the traffic movements are less, so why don't we give it to the flight schools? But a couple of aerodromes are not really suiting for the flight training, as I say, because of the weather conditions, the terrain, terrain around the aerodrome. It's not really possible. You can start a flight school, but the efficiency you cannot bring in. Say, for example, there are some aerodromes, even if you give more planes, more manpower, the weather conditions, the terrain around will not allow efficiently to progress flying, will not allow a decent flying. So this is the third is the aerodrome. And the fourth main important reason is I would tell approach to an integrated syllabus, basically. Integrated syllabus, when I'm telling, or an integrated program, that you have a theoretical program, you complete some part of the theoretical program, then you get on to the simulators, followed by you get on to your ab initio training, then your PPL, then your advanced PPL, then comes your CPL training, hour building, instrument rating, night flying, etc. So there is no such approach in the program, but the program is based on 2 of the sections under the schedules, which combine together for a commercial pilot license and instrument rated. And the program has been, every flight school has given the program. In total, there are 200 hours, but the way it is being structured is different for different flight schools. And I think it's time for BGCA to look at an option to come out with an integrated syllabus also.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I find your point, especially about I know there's a big push by the government to for the country to add more training aircraft. And I think a number of the aircraft manufacturers from around the world are also quite interested in deploying or selling their equipment, right? There's as you were saying, currently in India, right, you've got the Cessnas, you've got the Diamonds, and you've got the Pipistrelles. But other than that, you don't have really a broad range of other, and the Tecnams, I apologize, and the Tecnams, which have really been deployed quite substantially over the past couple of years. But deploying more aircraft, I think, will only solve part of the capacity, not necessarily the efficiency of the operation, unless these aircraft are newer aircraft. I know the Indian government is trying to solve that as well by putting in place this rule that only aircraft can be imported which are less than 20 years old. But in terms of some of the other things that you've mentioned, the integrated program, the maybe support for newer aircraft types or for additional infrastructure, I think, and this is something which I'm quite actively encouraging, is kind of cross-border collaboration. And also the reason why I think you are such a great person to speak with is because I know you believe in this as well. But what would you if there's any aircraft manufacturers listening, or if there's any international flight schools who are listening, or if there's any one listening who wants to get more exposure to the Indian flight training industry, what would your recommendation be in terms of how they can get access to the market and how they can collaborate with the market to capture some of this immense growth that India will see?
I think the manufacturers may very well, as a first choice, they may work with financial institutions inside India to make such programs so that they can sell their planes in India, so that it is easily affordable to the flight school owners, so that they can have more planes, number one. Number two, or if they're not working out, maybe they can have the manufacturer themselves can have a financing model within India with the terms and conditions prevailing at this point of time. And for eligible flight schools, they can deploy the machines for a certain period of time, and they may be able to get the revenue back. Not only that is not only the price of the aircraft, maybe some extra premium from the hours what they have generated over this fixed number of time. So this will help the startups, maybe especially startups who are unable to get maybe huge loans or some kind of a support. They may be able, because a startup these days is what, like, say, startup is done by people who are technically qualified and who have the wish to do something on their own. And I think the industry and the manufacturers must help them to come out. That's how the participation of the startups is very important for the industry growth. If you see in any other relevant industry for the last 10 years, it has been achieved through the startups, basically. Then the startups are the one, I think, which was always leading the path, or leading the way for the other bigger companies to follow, maybe in the last 10 years. That's what I could gather the information. Now, coming back to the manufacturers, so in India, we have a problem with respect to the fuel. Most of the aircraft, as I told, out of the 200 aircraft which is currently flying, less than 10%, maybe around close to 10% of the aircraft are fitted with diesel engines, which can burn the Jet A1, which is easily available in any aerodromes, airports, etc. Now, the rest of the 80 to 90% of the aircrafts are using AF-gas, or the 100 LL AF-gas, which is not available, and it has got its scarcity. And in this 2022 itself, I just heard that at least 3-4 schools did not fly for close to 20 days because of the non-availability of the fuel. You think of a situation when the weather is good, the team is ready, the aircrafts are ready, everything is ready, but you do not have the fuel to fly. 20 days, even if you have minimum three aircraft. So 20 into 3 into 6, close to around how much? 1,000 hours you lost. You have 3 aircraft every day, 6 hours, 20 days. It's a big loss. So we need to have such aircraft. Either it burns a Jet A1, which is easily accessible, or maybe the manufacturers can work the system out with DGCA so that the airplanes which fly with the more gas can have an easy accessibility of the fuel from the nearest sources, basically motor gas, which is easily available in every part of the country. So these are, I think, main things which the manufacturer should look at, so that they can also sell their machines and the industry will benefit. Plus, the efficiency also will go up. Plus, the final one is the aerodrome, as I told. Like say, I think it's every flight school need to understand which aerodrome where they need to operate and how they need to spread their things in such a manner that they get the maximum efficiency. So you cannot just operate a flight school in Delhi International Airport, telling that I'm in the capital of the country and I'm in the prime airport. You will not be able to give any efficiency. You will not be able to deliver anything, but you are in a location. So location definitely matters, and you cannot go to the extreme north because of the weather conditions in the winter. So you need to come to an compromise with all these things and select a location, select an aircraft, select the manpower. Thereby, you can increase the efficiency. And the manufacturers or the global airplane trainer aircraft manufacturer, they should really start looking India as a great potential for the sales of their machines. Because as you told, right now it's 200, and maybe in the next 10 years, out of this 200, maybe another 10% of the aircraft will be grounded due to their life getting over, And if you look at some of the aircrafts are lifespan, say Cessna has got a decent lifespan. Diamond also have got it. Maybe the new ones, maybe the lifespans are slightly, maybe around 10 to 12 years only. That means every 10 to 12 years, you need to buy new planes. So if they can start putting a system through which they can look at helping the industry, thereby helping themselves, and the efficiency can easily go up. And India can be self-sustainable in the pilot, in the requirement of pilots, maybe in another 5 years. I think 5 years, if it all goes well.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right for any training aircraft manufacturers, right? Currently, you've got 200 or so aircraft, training aircraft in India. That number is certainly supposed to double in the next short, in the next couple of years. And then on top of that, also you have more than a quarter of the existing fleet all being retired as well, maybe going into mandatory requirements. So you have a market which is looking for 300, 400, 500 training aircraft in the next couple of years. But what about cross-border collaboration? Because what I've seen, what I've seen until now is in India, you have simulator training centers, which are partnerships with international groups and local talent, local management, local subject matter experts. I haven't seen the same yet in the flight training space. I think the only organization in India which has an international partnership on the flight training side is CAE, which has their own facility in Gondia, their own flight school in Gondia. And then I know that 2 weeks ago at the air show, also IGRUA, which is the largest flight school in India, and it's the government flight school of India as well, has signed up a strategic collaboration with Boeing to kind of enhance their flight training processes and their flight training operations. What are your thoughts on a kind of, let's say, any international flight training groups who might be listening, if they wanted to get exposure to the Indian flight training industry? What would your recommendations be? Kind of what are you looking for? Since I know you also have the Embry-Riddle Asia partnership, so it would be quite good to hear your thoughts.
Max, personally, thank you for this question. Actually, you asked me this in the last question, but somehow I forgot while I was telling you the other parameters. But this is an important part of the industry. And personally, I believe that the growth can go at a greater pace with cross-border initiatives. By cross-border initiatives, what I understand and what I want to tell or what I believe in is, like, say, We have a knowledge level, we have a knowledge base, and we are increasing it, sharpening it on a day-to-day basis, XYZ. As a stakeholder, we are looking. BGCA is actively working on it. The department is now highly energized. The director of flying training department is now highly energized with people, with thoughts, with accessibility to more information abroad. So I think cross-border initiatives are a very important one for the growth of the industry. By cross-border initiatives, what are the points what are the plus points of the cross-border initiatives? Number one, you are enhancing your capacity, capability, your knowledge level, your standards, quality, your safety levels, and learning things from other countries, or the practices or the standards and the recommended practices which are followed by the other country. Even being under the ICAO, you have all the signatories, but sometimes when you go and fly in a different ICAO country, the standards and the practices or the quality, is totally different. So we can learn a lot from that. Number one. Number two, the theoretical training. When I say cross-border initiatives, if you look at the EASA, the theoretical training is one of the important aspects. Theoretical training, they give equally importance to all the three factors of the training. That means the classroom training, that is a theoretical training, the simulator sessions, and the flight training. Here in India, like say, the flight training takes 95% of the total time or total package, and the rest of the 5% is divided between the theoretical training and the flying simulator training. Now, it should be on the other hand, simulator training, ground training, that is theoretical training, and the flying training should be given equal importance. Cross-border initiatives like associating with foreign flight schools, foreign flight training centers will give a greater value adding proposition to the Indian flight school in terms of all the set one quality standards, safety, knowledge. Apart from that, they will also be able to help the Indian flight schools. Foreign flight schools will also be able to support the Indian FTOs or the startups with aircrafts, the simulators, can have a deeper association, and they can have their presence in India, and they will enhance their capacity and capability. And I think it is the need of the hour, and I think the flight schools abroad should look at India as a market for a cross-border initiatives with people, genuine companies, with people who are interested in doing so. That is very important, because I know there are few flight schools which have tried this maybe in the last, I know 2-3 flight schools which they tried, the foreign flight schools they tried in 2009, 11, 12, 13. They came all the way from different countries, including US, Canada, and North European, the Scandinavian or the countries, and South Europe countries, and Australia, New Zealand. They came all the way to India and started discussing with the Indian FTOs, but they never understood what is actually transparent. That is, nobody understood each other. I would put it like this, maybe the expectation by an Indian flight school with a foreign flight school must be something else, and finally they couldn't have an association. But I think platform like yours, people like you, may be able to make it happen. You are like a bridging program between the Indian flight training industry as well as the foreign flight schools, and I think it will happen. It need to happen.
What my key recommendation for anyone listening, so for any pilot training organization, specifically flight training organization interested in the Indian market, my key recommendation, which was also my takeaway now of a couple of years of studying the market, of my time meeting you in Hyderabad, and spending a lot of time with all of the different stakeholders over the past few weeks in India, was that any foreign flight school targeting the Indian market should be aware that they can try to target the Indian aspiring pilots from abroad, but that there will be significant roadblocks being put in place, and these roadblocks will just increase more and more, since there's a clear instruction by the government to enhance the flight training infrastructure in India itself. So for any flight schools from abroad looking to target the Indian market, my key recommendation is to look into these cross-border initiatives. Like you've said previously, quite a few flight training organizations.
Max, I would like to add a point here. Maybe in the past, or maybe in the last 10 years, maybe foreign flight schools have come to India, maybe to look at as a source for procurement of the students, or for a source to get the students so that they can go to those countries and get trained. But on the other hand, I think now in the coming days, I think it will be not that workable. Maybe the foreign flight schools need to show some interest. They need to have some interest. They need to take it seriously. I would tell it, take it seriously. They need to have some presence. By presence, I mean that they need to have some value addition in the system within this country. So take it. So they just can't come and associate. I don't think they can. But what I'm telling is, if they come and just associate with somebody, and if they think that this can be a source of the students coming, or the gateway for the students, I think it might not work. And one more thing is that different flight schools have got different approaches. The same thing. See, Part 61 schools and Part 141 schools. What do you think about the Part 61 and Part 141? The Indian student community, always they try to go for a Part 61 school or a modular program. It has got its plus, it has got its minuses. The integrated ones are the best ones, as I understand. Finally, the people who join a 141 or an integrated or a Part 61 and a modular, they come back and they get the same license back in India. And what the course they have undergone is not given any weightage, So, so the integrated programs have been not given any weightage in India. So I think the association or the proposed cross-border initiatives should have a deeper ties, should be more serious in the market, should find out relevant partners, serious partners, or serious people who are looking at this on a long-term basis rather than for a short-term sourcing of students. That is very important.
Yeah, I think this is the clear change from maybe 10 years ago, which is exactly like what you've said. Flight schools now who want to target the Indian market and want to be successful in it. I think this is the key point. Want to be successful will need to be a value add to the domestic flight training infrastructure in India. The government will make sure of this. The Indian flight schools will want to make sure of this. So any flight school interested to be successful in the Indian market should really look at what value they can bring to the system, be it in terms of technical know-how, be it in terms of aircraft, be it in terms of manpower, be it in terms of investment, be it in terms of a whole range of value additions that it can bring to the system. And my other key recommendation is really for any international flight training organization to go and go to India, be on the ground, right? Head to Hyderabad, visit Captain Shane, head to Delhi, head to Mumbai, and get a sense of the current system, because as both of us were saying, over the coming years, it is going to become increasingly more difficult for international organizations to target the Indian market, or one could say it will become increasingly better or easier to be successful as an international group by establishing a cross-border partnership with an Indian player or with a presence in India. And because that is what the government and the local industry is heavily pushing. So thank you for sharing your insights.
And Max, I just want to add one more thing, which I think we have forgot. Like, say, what is the role of airlines in the training industry? Because see, the flight schools, yes, are commercial organizations, training organizations, you call it, but the flight schools are producing people, trained manpower, people for the airlines. The end user is the airline. And don't you think that the airlines need to have a strong, I would not tell cross border, I would tell a collaboration with the flight training industry. Then your circuit is completed. Say, for example, the flight schools recruiting the students, train them, and after training the product is out, that is the product is well trained or the pilot is well trained, and the trained pilot gets into an airline, and their airline uses him for their own business prior activities, which is growing. More well trained pilot means more business. When you get more business, don't you think that they should complete the circuit by helping the flight schools, say by organizing some funds, some alliances, some programs, and to help homegrown FTOs to come up, rather than having association with foreign flight schools with a mindset that in India we don't have the ability, capacity, capability. On the other hand, I think the airlines must look, it is the need of the hour for the airlines to look at the Indian flight schools, come down to the ground along with us, sit with us, talk with us, understand what we need. And I think they'll be able to benefit the most from this.
Well, my view on this is that for the airlines, especially now with COVID, their core business is the transport of passengers. So even in terms of the pilot training infrastructure to support that mission of transporting passengers, we are only starting to see airlines enter the space again due to them wanting to establish secure supply lines in order to have enough pilots to fly the aircraft. Now, when it comes to India, I know, or my opinion or my speculation is that as long as the Indian airlines have secure supply lines of where they can get qualified pilots, it is as a business, right? It would not really drive their mindset in terms of where these pilots are coming from, as long as they're coming from a certain standard of training, and that they have the secure pipeline. Now, with the establishment of secure pipelines in India for airlines, right, the flight schools would have to demonstrate that they can deliver not only that standard of quality of training, which I'm sure they can, but also the efficiency and the pipeline, that secure pipeline capability, but more that magnitude, right? If for example today one of the large Indian airlines went to a domestic flight school and said, we want to have 80 to 100 new first officers every single year, how many of the current Indian flight schools would be able to deliver on that requirement by certain Indian airlines? It, just in terms of their infrastructure, it just also would not be possible. So I think the Indian airlines certainly have a role in this, but I think it is not going to be as they're certainly not going to be a driver in this cross-border initiative. I think it will mostly be the government which will encourage operators in India to use homegrown solutions, and that international flight training groups can then capture some of these opportunities through cross-border collaborations with organizations such as yourself, where they are putting in value and resources and time and effort into enhancing the domestic pilot training infrastructure. Do you agree?
That's right. I agree. Maybe I agree. Yes, now none of the Indian flight schools, if you take it as an individual FTOs, they do not have the capacity to produce that many pilots what an airlines wanted, But by offering some help support to make them grow over years, maybe 2 years. Right now, yes, post-pandemic, they are busy in increasing, looking at their business, core business. But there is a time which comes where they are self-sufficient, and in the sense they need more pilots. And that time, once they rush to the flight schools, maybe the flight schools will still be in the same condition as it was 2 years back. So I think some attention need to be given to the flight schools by the airlines. This is my pure thought and recommendation, suggestion.
Okay.
I would tell the suggestion.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you for sharing your insights with us today, Captain Shane. Just so for everyone's knowledge or reference, if you want to learn more about Aviacons, so Captain Shane's organization, pilot training organization based in Hyderabad, you can check out their website, www.aviacons.org, or you can find Captain Shane on LinkedIn. We'll put his LinkedIn profile in the description as well as the website of Aviacons. So thank you for sharing your insights with us today, Captain Shane.
Thank you, Max, for inviting me for this podcast. And it was nice talking to you. We shared some good information. I hope we'll continue to do so.
Fantastic.
Have
a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.